are not her father.
Number 1. Watts versus Cheryl. A grieving mother who recently lost her 2 sons is confronted with discovering if her late son actually fathered the child his girlfriend claims he did.
You stand here on his behalf because you doubt he fathered the defendant's 20-month-old son, Caden, and you have asked for a DNA test to determine the truth.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mrs. Watts shares the tragic story of how her 2 sons were ambushed and killed while visiting a friend.
Received a phone call to come to a shooting where they said that my son was involved. When I got there, I didn't know at the time that my other son was there as well. My 2 sons went to visit a friend who had some type of altercation with some gentlemen prior to my sons coming to visit their home. And when my 2 sons got there, they were ambushed and murdered.
Where does 19-month-old baby Caden come into this story? Well, Cheryl and Alex had been in an affectionate and on-and-off relationship for 3 years until Alex's untimely death. On the other hand, Cheryl had a one-night fling during one of her off weeks and later discovered she was pregnant. After Cheryl gave birth to Caden, she raised doubts about the child's paternity for Mrs. Watt, and there's proof.
My son had went away for some time, and before he went away, he told me that Alexis was pregnant. I guess this was during the time that they were on their breakup. He was involved with someone else. And then when she had Caden, I said, "Miss Caden, Alexis," and she said that she didn't know she needed a DNA test.
This is a text message between you and Ms. Sherrill.
Yes.
And you ask, question, are you pregnant by Alex? And Ms. Sherrill responds, I don't really know, I don't believe so, but at this moment, I don't know, I have to get a blood test.
Not really an assuring reply, don't you agree? Anywho, Alex took care of the baby boy until his unfortunate death, showing him love and letting his family meet Caden.
To him, Caden was his child. Blood test or not, Caden was his.
On Caden's birth certificate, there is no surname.
I see Caden's birth certificate. On the birth certificate, there is no father's name listed. Caden's last name is not your last name, and it's not Mr. Stewart's last name.
Here's what Cheryl said when she was certain Caden was Alex's child.
A photo of Caden and Mr. Stewart. This is a side-by-side photo.
You can see, like, their face is exactly the same, the way his face is shaped, them teeth.
Both sides have rendered their testimonies and proof. Now for Judge Lauren, or rather the DNA test, to give the verdict. And guess what? Drum roll.
When it comes to 20-month-old Caden, it has been determined by this court the percentage of relatedness between Ms. Lita Watts and Caden is 0.006%.
Caden's facial resemblances to Alex is just that after all. No blood relationship. Number 2. St. James versus Esau. What happens when your daddy for 33 years says he is not your daddy? This is the case of 33-year-old Jasmine St. James and her brother KJ against Jasmine's supposed father, Mr. Esau, who after 33 years said he is, in fact, not her biological father.
Your father dropped a bomb on you and said, you are not my daughter. You and your brother have opened a case to prove paternity today. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Jasmine had an argument with Mr. Esau, which resulted in him addressing her, I am not your father.
He didn't answer my questions. He basically responded 3 days later with the reason why you went through the things you did as a child is because you're not my daughter.
So, Jasmine is stuck with her father's words, except the Honorable Judge, Lauren Lake, could clear the air. So, where are the paternity doubts from?
Which could the doubt have been if you ended up continuing the relationship, getting married, having another child? What's happening here?
One of the things also talking to my mom, and she explained the time frames. Okay, she sat down and talked to me and was like, okay, when did this happen? When did that happen? When did this happen?
And he probably told her whatever she needed to hear.
And what the doctor said.
For some bizarre reason, though, Mr. Esau didn't reject the child and even got married and started a family with Jasmine's late mom, raising Jasmine and her brother KJ as children.
It's hard. Like I said, it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, and it's hard. It's never the right time. I always had it, and I take full responsibility for that because I should have.
Even his biological son wasn't taking the sudden news well, with KJ stating how devastating it was for him to hear such news after so many years.
Through my whole life, I thought that Jasmine was my sister. We were the only ones that came from my mom and him, so that's all I've known, him being my father. So to get this news like this is just, it's hurting as far as, the allegations put upon my mother.
Yes.
He did mention that his father, Mr. Esau, had called him years ago and said Jasmine wasn't his biological daughter. But it turned out to be a drunk call.
But my dad did call me one time in 2009. He had a little liquor in him, and he was crying, and he said that Jasmine might not be his.
Jasmine has always been a daddy's girl, so learning that the first man that she grew to love was not her father was devastating.
I've been throwing up every day. I have anxiety. I have stress. I have an autistic son that I'm trying to raise. I've been just, ever since, I can't eat. I'm losing weight. I'm just torn apart.
Jasmine had even gone as far as trying to find the two men whose names Mr. Esau gave her as potential fathers, and here's what she found.
Other guys got booty chins too. I went looking for both of the men.
That is not how I told
found
you.
one of them, and he said that my mom and dad told him that he didn't need to worry about it because I was his child.
Judge Lauren has heard enough, and it's time to read out the results.
It has been determined by this court. You are not the father.
The truth sets you free, but with more than a bit of pain. Number 3, Dandridge versus Sigmund. It's a whole different story when a woman first meets the man she believes to be her father. Cassandra Dandridge has brought her case to court in an attempt to discover who her biological father is.
Ms. Dandridge, you have asked for a few minutes alone with me before the defendant joins us.
Yes, ma'am.
You say you are here to determine if you finally found your biological father.
Yes, ma'am.
You claim you were recently given the name of someone you believe is that man, though you've never laid eyes on him before.
Thankfully, we're in the 21st century and have social media, so Miss Dandridge could get a name for her possible father via Facebook.
Roughly 3 months ago, I posted on Facebook, this status may hurt some people's feelings, but I really want to know who my dad is. And my mom, she got on there and she told me that I was a liar and that I never asked who my dad was and just threw his name at me. And then after she gave me that name, she told me to never contact her again. I made a Facebook page called Finding Joseph Lester Sigmund. Monday, I have a missed call, and it was from a North Carolina number, and I call it back, and the man answers the phone and says, "Is there a young lady looking for a Joe Sigmund?" I say, "Yes, sir, that's me. I have a few questions for you."
A call that turned out to be the main piece of her lifelong quest to find her biological father.
"Were you in Florida in the 80s? And he says yes. And I ask him if he knows my mother by name. And he says yes. And he describes her what she looks like down to a T.
Really?
Yes.
And you've never met Mr. Sigmund?
No, ma'am.
And what a sight it is as the said Mr. Sigmund makes his way into the courtroom. Imagine the joy when Facebook helped his long-lost daughter reach out to him, and finally they have a chance to fill the gap in both of their hearts.
I have doubts because I was told I was sterile. Plus sometimes during the weekends she went to her mother's on the weekends. She could have been with other guys.
I agree totally. I hope he is my dad. I have a whole life, that he was robbed of if this man is my father. And I really want him to be my dad. I need this.
I've never had nothing my whole life. I've never been married. I didn't have kids. Now she's my new hope.
Your new hope.
Yeah, we're just alike. She looks like my sister. She's got my cheekbones, my jaw face, she's got my eyes. She's got my sister's looks when she was small. There's no doubt. Plus I could feel it.
This was practically a fairy tale reunion, a real narrative that would make the most romantic Hollywood film a fantasy. But it was all a fantasy.
You are not her father. Sit her down, Mr.
This is one of the most heartbreaking scenes in court. Even Judge Lauren had to come down to console Miss Dandridge.
Honey, oh my goodness. Here, take your jacket off. Take your jacket off.
If this doesn't make you pull out some tissue paper, we wonder what will. Number 4. Binning and Bodine. Having doubts of paternity about one child can break a man's spirit, but what about two? That's what we have in the case of Mr. Binning and Miss Bodine. Mr. Binning, the plaintiff, had already been in couples court with the same partner, Miss Bodine.
Recently appeared in couples court, and it was confirmed that the defendant cheated on you. This infidelity has caused questions regarding your 2-year-old daughter, Robin, and 6-month-old son, Jermaine Jr.'s paternity. Although you are hopeful that both are your children, you now have doubts. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Binning speaks positively of his connection with his daughter, Robin.
Well, first off, Your Honor, my mother passed away when I was 14 years old. She was my best friend. We spent every waking moment together. And after she died, it, left me hurt. I always wanted a daughter, and I promised I was going to take care of her and treat her like my mother took care of me. We are so close. She's goofy, she loves daddy. She's a daddy's baby.
Miss Bodine wholeheartedly believes both kids are Mr. Binning's, so it all looks like a happy story. But here is where things start to get nasty.
It actually happened during labor, Your Honor. I was in the hospital sitting across from Kayla. She was pushing this baby out. I received a text from a guy telling me to leave the hospital because that's his baby and he needs to be there. As well as, Your Honor, anytime that something is wrong, I'm also reminded, oh, you're not her father. As soon as we start to argue, you're not her father.
Now that's a plot twist, a cruel one. One can't even blame him for having doubts about him being the father of his kids, even though his daughter reminds him of his late loving mother.
Yeah, I had to change her diaper and look at her and play with her, and she's calling me daddy, and there's something in the back of my head saying she might not be. There's a text message on my phone saying she's not yours.
But that's not all. Mr. Binning also has more evidence, and you won't believe Miss Bodine's justification for doing such.
On top of that, the same thing with the texting me, telling me I'm not the father. I even received a text telling me after he was born, which I still went through the whole labor, everything. After that, after all that, I get a text telling me, oh, I want a paternity test for Jermaine too. Like, why would you say that if
And
that's
that
my
was
junior?
submitted to the court.
Yes, it was, Your Honor.
I'm filing papers for a DNA test on Jermaine.
Mr. Binning has been through a lot already, but the DNA test results for Robin hold nothing but pain for Mr. Binning Jermaine.
Mr. Binning, you are not the father.
And that's not even all. The tests for Jermaine Jr. as well were read, and
You are not the father.
Mr. Binning is a decent man, and here's what he had to say about the outcome, despite his heartbreak.
It doesn't matter, I'm still gonna be there. You can't change it. We spent 2 years together, you can't change that.
We hope he does heal. Number 5. Wheat versus Grider/Sloan. This perplexing situation involves a woman, a daughter, and 4 possible dads. Mr. Wheat filed the lawsuit because he believes he had been denied the right to connect with his 19-year-old daughter.
Mr. Wheat, you filed your case because you claim you've been robbed as a father. You are desperate to prove to the defendant that you fathered her 19-year-old daughter.
But how does this whole mess come about? Well, Mrs. Charlene Grider has an answer we've never heard before.
Because I was 19, I was young, dumb, and full of eggs, and I was doing me.
Young, dumb, and full of eggs and doing me. I don't think I've ever heard it explained like that.
That's quite an answer. She heard the song Young, Dumb, and Broke and promised Khalid she'd outdo him. What role does Mr. Wheat play during Charlene's young, dumb, full of eggs and doing me era? Here is that story.
I met her back when I was in high school. Well, we lost contact for a little while, and then I ran into her at a club called Texas Nightlife, and kind of had a one-night stand. And I don't know how many more months later, I found out she was pregnant.
We can tell you're intrigued to know the next part of this family thriller, so here it is.
So how many guys were you with during the window of time your daughter was?
4.
4 different guys.
How did she manage to have 4 potential fathers for one child? Even Judge Lauren wants to know.
One of them was my boyfriend. He was living with me at the time, and he went away. Mac had moved in with me. I'd met him through a mutual friend of all of ours. And yes, we were sleeping together. And then I went out to Texas Nightlife and saw David and had a one-night stand with him at that time.
If you wanted to get laid, Texas nightlife was the place to go. Mr. Wheat was aware he was expecting a child and was still absent, so where is the robbery Mr. Wheat mentions? Only he wasn't trying to be absent.
Okay, did she even tell you she was going into labor?
She called me that day and told me, and I told her I'd come up there in a little bit. Well, my family went up there. I called her back, said, hey, I'm on my way. She told me not to bother.
From experience with paternity court, the mother's intuition is almost always right. So maybe this time too? Charlene couldn't confirm or deny telling Mr. Wheat not to come to the hospital, but here's what we did learn after Mr. Grider took the stand.
What was your relationship with the defendant?
She is my ex-wife.
She's your ex-wife. All right. So do you think you are Sierra's, Miss Sloan's biological father?
There is a possibility. You're having sex more than the other guy.
Oh, what confusion and sadness Sierra must be feeling, being the centerpiece of this whole puzzle and having only hints of who her biological father could be.
Upset that I never knew who my real dad was.
You were always told that it was uncertain.
I've had a father figure throughout the years, and he's watched me grow up and never really knew who my dad was.
Now for the most shocking part of the case. The results are ready, and it is time to announce them. The first test was for Mac Grider, the father figure for 19 years.
You are not the father.
Ouch, that must hurt. But there's more.
You are not the father.
Neither of the men in the room is Sierra's biological father, and oh, the emotions that followed. Number 6, Henderson versus Rycroft. It's another case of an adult woman trying to find out who her biological father is, but still, it's a different case. 33-year-old Miss Henderson is left confused about who her dad is and has appeared in our favorite judge's paternity court with 2 men, either of which could be her dad. Mr. Rycroft believes he is her dad and is joined by Miss Henderson's aunt, Mrs. Murray, who also supports his claim.
I just felt that she was my daughter.
And then just to know that my sister's resting in her grave and that my niece needs to know who her family really is. I mean, I just need to know too for sure so she can get a peace of mind.
Of course, growing up in such a drama and finding out her dad isn't her dad was not only confusing but also traumatic for Miss Henderson.
And growing up, you were told, Mr. Henderson, this is who you grew up knowing was your father.
Yes, and during the time that I stayed there, I was treated different from my sisters. They used to tell me I wasn't their uncle's daughter, that I was adopted. So I asked her. I asked him too. I said, Daddy, are you my daddy? And he told me that he was like, I'm the only daddy you got. And so when my mom came home, I told her, I was like, I know that Walter isn't my dad. I don't look like my sisters. So she just gave me another name. And so I'm just tired of hearing all these different names.
Thanks to Mrs. Murray, though, her twin sister's story was set straight, at least for now.
When it comes to telling the truth on certain things, they'll beat around the bush. And like she didn't answer him when she came back.
But why did she have to lie? What was the late Mrs. Henderson's reason for lying to everybody else but her twin?
Because they both was in a relationship. They both was married. And then when my sister called and told me, and I said, it's not my place to tell.
Despite hearing these testimonies, Miss Henderson still has her doubts because her mom told her there was a third man.
So, Miss Henderson, when you listen to this testimony, does it make you believe that Mr. Rycroft is your biological father?
No. Before my mom passed, I was questioning her. Who was my dad? And she gave me this man's name. I thought I looked like him too. And he remembered my mom.
The probability of paternity was determined to be 0.00%.
The paternity court just keeps on giving. So, our list is narrowed to the 2 men in the courtroom. It has to be. That was weighty news. Lauren Lake just dropped, and not everybody has the stomach or energy for it.
Get the medic. Get the medic.
Someone call the medic, please.
Before we have any other twists and turns, the results are ready, and they are as unbelievable as the entire case has been. Neither man is her father.
Mr. Henderson, you are not the father. You are not the father.
You are, Dad.
I'm so sorry.
How does something this heart-shattering even happen? Only on Paternity Court. We're sure you enjoyed this video and maybe shed a tear, so make sure you like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications as well so you don't miss any of our other wonderful videos.